Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is Wednesday, and it's going to be a Woody Wednesday, which is the best kind that there possibly is. We'll be back in there. Ohio State's long media blackout is over. Ryan Day and every assistant coach are scheduled to meet with the media and talk with us later on Wednesday morning, and we will have full coverage of that, as we always do. It wasn't really what we planned. Berman and I were supposed to be in Vegas, so we'll start with some of that news up front, that Cameron Brown is dealing with a little bit of a groin injury, so he pulled out of the Shrine Bowl, and that allowed Berman and I to stay here so that Bill didn't have to be by himself in the Woody on Wednesday. What a great turn of events for us, and not so great for Cam Brown.
Yeah, Cam will be okay. It's a little nagging thing. It just, you don't take a chance at the Shrine Bowl. You got there, you got the interviews done with the teams that you need to talk to, and then get ready for the combine. Makes more sense that way.
Okay.
That's one thing I've always said. Don't take a chance at the Shrine Bowl.
It's rule number one for the path to the draft.
It's rule number one of Vegas, pretty much. Don't take a chance in Vegas.
That's actually not what they advise.
Really?
Yeah.
That's bad advice.
This was going to be a real learning experience for you going to Vegas with me for a week. Just now that you've learned how to use gambling apps and you could get the real deal in person.
No, thanks. I'll stick to that app. Bill, we're going to talk to every assistant coach for the first time in 10 months. First time we've had any.
Some of them haven't talked in longer than that.
First time we've had any media availability since the end of the Peach Bowl. What is question number one that whether it's Ryan Day, whether it's any assistant, what is the first thing on Bill Landis's mind?
Well, the first thing on my mind is probably not the most important thing or the most pressing thing. It's just my nature to be curious about the offensive line. But the most pressing thing is what's going on with the play calling. Like, Brian Hartline's the offensive coordinator, and now what? So, and maybe that's the way to ask it, because I don't know. I think we all assume that Ryan Day is inching toward giving up play calling, but as we've discussed in the past, it would be kind of weird to give it to a guy who's never done it before at this particular juncture. So, not to say that he won't. I think he probably will, but I would like to get a little more information about that thought process and how that's all going to work.
It's more of Ryan Day's mindset than anything else about what he needs to do, right? I mean, if Brian Hartline is the guy that we think is being tabbed to call plays, he's been successful with basically everything he's ever done in football, and there's probably not any reason to think that would stop at calling plays. It's not a guarantee, but you can see why they might make that move. But it's more like, is Ryan Day going to come out today and say, you know what? It is the time demands. I'm not able to do it to the level that I want. I dialed up a great game in the Peach Bowl, but I had 2 weeks before that where I didn't have to deal with the transfer portal and recruiting, signing day, getting through everything else with putting together a coaching staff. It was quiet, and I got to actually coach ball, and I did that well. I think that would be the honest answer. I'm afraid that he may say, oh, well, we're going to see what happens in March, and we'll script some stuff, and we'll let Brian try it, and we'll decide that in August or in the first week of September.
But why would you be afraid of that? Don't you think that's an honest answer too?
No, I don't think that's an honest answer.
I think that is an honest answer. I think the idea of saying, let's wait and see what happens as we get into spring and see how he handles it is a honest answer, as opposed to saying, I'm definitely going to give it up when, because we don't know if that's the case. Right.
I guess the reason that I use that word, if you don't already have a clear-cut plan for how you want this to work, I don't think that move you make with Brian Hartline checks a lot of boxes. I
understand it being the plan. I'm saying the plans change based on new available evidence, right? I mean, that certainly should be the plan heading into spring, but we don't know.
If Brian Hartline can't call plays in spring ball.
But we also know that there's no reason to say anything heading into spring, because nothing happens in play calling until the season. So I think it's honest to say, we're going to evaluate it. Because if he comes out tomorrow and says, well, Brian's our play caller, everyone's going to write about it. It's going to be this whole big thing. And then in week 3 of the season at Notre Dame, when Ryan Day decides to change something up midway through the game in South Bend, people go, what the hell, bro, Ryan, what are you doing? You lose. I mean, and he's going to be like, look, this is the first time play caller. We're plotting as we go, right? Plotting, not with T's, but D's, right? You're just trying to get along and see how it works.
If they're plotting, I would recommend that that's probably not ideal either.
Well, but you have a lot of time.
You're going to have to be getting up to speed pretty quickly. You have a Big Ten road game to start, and then you go to Notre Dame before the end of September. So,
but they've got 8 months to plod right now. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of plodding time.
Okay.
You don't have to stay home, but you can't plod here. Great. You know what I mean? So just move along. Move along.
Let's pick another question.
You pick a question. It's your turn.
It's another one that I know we're not going to get an answer to, but certainly one that needs to be asked. How does Ryan Day envision the March and April practices working with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown? I think that Zach Boren really brought up a good point on Monday at Roosters. If it's Kyle McCord's job to lose, is that different than an open competition? Are you giving every first string rep to Kyle McCord and waiting for something else to happen or a shoe to drop or him not to, handle the job the way you want before you let Devin Brown take more? Or is Tuesday going to be a Kyle McCord day with the first team and Devin Brown gets Thursday and you go back and forth and evaluate it from there? I do think that there is a difference between those two things. It may seem like semantics, but in reality it isn't. And I think I don't think we're going to get a clear answer on that. And they may not even know, again, as to Berm's point with the play calling, they don't have to decide right this second. They may not have to decide on March 7th how they want to handle that either. But this is the most, important quarterback competition, any position battle that's going on in the country for a national title contender, I would say. And it's one of the most important positions in all of college football on a year in, year out basis. So that scrutiny is going to be there, and we'll see if Ryan Day elects to handle it in any different way than he has previously. I'm betting that he won't. If even Justin Fields didn't leave spring camp as a starting quarterback, then that probably means that neither Kyle McCord nor Devin Brown will either.
Bill, do you see this and realize or think about it from like Ryan Day's perspective that this is the first true quarterback competition he's had to coach in college? Because we all knew Justin was going to be the guy regardless of what was said in the spring. We all knew CJ was going to be the guy after Justin left. So do you think that he will handle it differently based on the fact that this is probably more of a real competition?
Well, I suppose he handled Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins, right? He didn't make the decision. It was Urban Meyer's call, but he was the quarterback's coach. So this is different. I don't know. Probably it is interesting to me, like the way we talk about this, because CJ Stroud had done nothing prior to being named the starting quarterback that told you that it was his job to lose. Yet we acted that way the entire time, and it felt like it played out that way. And why isn't it playing it out? Why isn't that same feeling lingering now?
Because CJ Stroud was the only quarterback who'd been in the program at that point for longer than a year. And at this juncture, you have certainly Kyle McCord.
Well, no, Jack was
2
there.
years.
I mean, Jack Miller was there with CJ for a year.
With one year, correct? I suppose we didn't. But when we watched it, every time that Justin did come out of the game in 2020, the guy that went in with CJ, it became sort of, I think, cut and dried. But it does feel different with these two because you have McCord, who's been there 2 years, Brown, who's been there now a full year, a full season. It seems like they're more on level footing. Kyle's been there 2 years. Devin's been there 1. I'm curious if he's going to handle it different.
I don't actually think that they are on level footing, Bill. I mean, sorry to jump in there.
No, it's okay.
We'll see what happens in March and April, and I understand why there is so much excitement about the dual threat ability of Devin Brown. And then I think the same thing that I thought when it was Dwayne and Joe. Both of these guys are more than capable of starting for Ohio State and leading them back to a Big Ten championship. I don't think that there's a wrong answer here. I do think that Kyle McCord is getting, because he's no longer the shiniest, newest 5-star object in Ohio State's quarterback room, that he's not getting some of the credit he does for being more athletic than, and not just a statue, for next level arm strength, ability to process and diagnose and read defenses and make the proper throws. Now, again, he hasn't done this on a full-time basis, so it's the same situation as always. There's nothing that's guaranteed about it, but with 2 years in the system, we talked about this on the quarterback preview episode of the Podcast Daily last week, with 58 throws and a start under his belt, he is more advanced in terms of on-field development than the guys that came before him, and certainly well ahead of where CJ Stroud was. So I do think that gives him an edge, and I do view this more heading into March as it being his job to lose, but I'm just one person. That's the way I view it right now, and it doesn't matter how I feel anyway, because Ryan Day is the one that's going to have to make this decision.
I think that is the fair way to view it. Like if we are to treat it how we've treated every other situation like this when it's come up under Ryan Day, I think that's the right way to view it. And Berm, you're right. Like CJ Stroud came in for Justin Fields in 2020 a couple of times, but like they needed a starter in 2021 when CJ couldn't play, and it was Kyle. Like it didn't have to be Kyle. It was him. He was like number 2 immediately. He leaped the guy who was there for a year. And I know that situation didn't quite arise this past year. All of Kyle's reps were pure kind of garbage time backup reps. So he was still the first guy into the game. He was the only, like, they didn't let Devin Brown throw the ball around at all. So I think there probably is a gap there. I don't know if Ryan Day would describe it that way, but I think if anyone feels like it's Kyle McCord's job to lose, or that it should be Kyle McCord's job to lose, I think that makes sense. Like he has bided his time. He's put in the 2 years waiting to become CJ Stroud's successor. So it is different because, just to be honest, I don't think anybody expected a guy like Jack Miller to win Ohio State's starting quarterback job. Devin Brown has all the tools to do it. So that changes the dynamic a little bit. But I myself, I think I'm guilty of just sort of overlooking Kyle McCord because there's a lot to like about Devin Brown. And that's probably the wrong way to go about it.
Because he's from West Jersey. And
yeah,
you have
that's his bias.
And you got a personal embittered feud. Speaking of changing dynamics, I think that's one of the questions I have really for Wednesday is with Brian Hartline. How does his role as a recruiter change at all, if at all, by being the offensive coordinator? Does he get more involved in recruiting other players? Does he get more involved in helping get to know the quarterbacks and seeing how these guys could possibly go with what he's looking for if he's the play caller? So all these things kind of tie together. But I do wonder if that increased responsibility comes at slightly a cost in the wide receiver recruiting, and if that puts the onus on Hartline to even more so than he's always done, really identify his guys early so he can just circle them and work only on those 3 or 4 guys that he's recruiting, as opposed to the wider net that seems like Ohio State needs to cast because of NIL and everything else that's happening in recruiting. I wonder if Brian's responsibilities change will get in the way of that a little bit.
I don't want to step on your toes in your area of expertise.
I want you to.
I would imagine that Keenan Bailey being able to go out in a full-time capacity probably alleviates some of that concern. Don't know that for sure. Just going to speculate and spitball on that one. But it feels like it would be a waste of his ability to just say, you're only going to recruit tight ends. I don't think Keenan Bailey would want to do that. So if he becomes more active with anyone who's a passing game target, because he has worked directly with and alongside Brian Hartline for a long time, I think that they share a lot of viewpoints in what they want to evaluate in talent and the way that they handle that job. I think that probably would mitigate some of that. You also don't want to fully take Brian Hartline, the best recruiter of wide receivers in the country, away from that responsibility because you already know that he can do that. But you want to at the same time maximize the personnel that you have, what they do well, and develop the next wave of that. That's probably, when you look at the way that staff is aligned right now, how Keenan Bailey can help so that Brian Hartline doesn't have to only focus on wide receivers.
Can one of them recruit defensive players?
So
they're allowed to.
Bill, what's your next question? Was that your next question?
No, that is
James Laurinaitis is going to get to help. We're going to get to talk to him on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's true. He can help. He can't go out on the road though. I want to ask Worm a question, but it's kind of a mean question. I don't know if he want to answer it or if he can answer it quickly off the top of his head.
Sure.
If you run down all the coaches who are allowed to go on the road and recruit, and how far down do you get on the list before you hit a defensive coach?
4, 5, maybe 5.
Seems like an issue.
Right now, I mean, as far if you're dealing with productivity and reputation and all that stuff in one, obviously it's been a rough couple of years on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Brian Hartline's elite. Corey Dennis for the fact that he maybe not be as involved on a day-to-day basis in the development of quarterbacks. He's obviously very important in the recruiting of quarterbacks. Tony Alford, despite losing his commitment last year in 2020. 2023 class and then going over in 2020 or until you get Mine Williams at the end. I think people have questions about him, but he's proven to be a lead over and over. Justin Fry has done a great job. Perry Eliano got off to a really great start last year, but didn't really finish strong. Larry Johnson had his worst year as a recruiter that I can recall in the time I've covered him. Some of that is because the game is changing and styles need to adapt, but certainly it is a concern for Ohio State, which is why, as we talked about on Monday, James Laurinaitis and his addition is so vital because he helps Jim Knowles on a day-to-day basis in a way that he absolutely needs it. And that's kind of one of my questions that I want to know. So I'll just skip ahead. Who's the guy coming in to be the defensive line assistant with Larry Johnson? Because that's what Miguel Patrick did last year, and he was so good at it and very vital in all of the relationships that Ohio State was building, not just on the defensive line, but in the Southeast. Who's the guy that's going to fill that spot next? Because that is a really important thing. I know Tony Alford losing Riley Jeffers. He went down to UAB. They've replaced him with a running backs coach from Middle Tennessee State, who's now at Ohio State. His name escapes me, but I know he's been hired. So there's some movements that have to happen with the rest of the staff that those little things are, we talk a lot about potential big moves. Like, we've talked, maybe Tim Walton goes back to the NFL or something crazy, but it's the other guys that are filling in those roles that are really important for Ohio State. That support staff has been huge for Ryan Day.
The way I asked that was my smart aleck way, I suppose, of getting to what I actually think is an important question for Ohio State, which is the bit of the imbalance, I think, in talent that's coming into the program in terms of favoring the offense. And it felt like the 2022 recruiting class was a step back in the right direction. And even 2021 with the defensive lineman they got. Then this past cycle just felt like a little bit of a reversion. And while I think there's a lot of reason to be very excited about the scheme that Jim Knowles has brought to the table, and I like very much how the defense played by and large last year, it just seems like they're still lacking juice on that side of the ball when it comes to bringing in the type of player they need to be bringing in. And I would like to know what Ryan Day thinks of that, and if anything, he plans on doing to address that.
Yeah, we talked about it on Monday. I mean, now with the addition of Davison Igbinosun, who we haven't talked about yet, but he announced his commitment to Ohio State, the Ole Miss transfer on Tuesday. You have 6 scholarship cornerbacks. You have 12 scholarship defensive linemen in the spring. That's just not enough, and that is a problem. It's also weird because you have like 9 safeties and 11 linebackers, so you don't know exactly how this all works. Like, there's 2 spots that you're like, what happened here?
Yeah, and that's what I would like to know from Jim Knowles. Twofold. How are you going to fit these pieces together? Because it's not immediately clear to me what's the best spot for Lathan Ransom at safety moving forward. What's the best way to get Kai Stokes and Sonny Styles involved? I think we all assume that Jihad Carter is going to play in the nickel. Is that still a role where Cameron Martinez can contribute, or does he need to try something else yet again in the secondary, whether that be corner or one of the other safety spots? How does that work all together? We've called it a safety-driven defense, and that was the unit that struggled the most, in my estimation, against Michigan in the fourth quarter, or against Michigan starting in the second quarter, and then definitely the fourth quarter of the Peach Bowl, but some plays sprinkled throughout. That was the unit that got picked on from my amateur evaluation from the outside. So how can that be corrected in year 2 for Jim Knowles? Does he view what happened in those 2 games as being overly aggressive? Does there have to be a different approach when you're leading games, when you're seeing some looks that maybe you didn't expect, or is he causing some of these issues? I know that you can point to players slipping or blown assignments or whatever else, and Cam Brown letting somebody slip out of his hand on a missed tackle that is not direct responsibility of Jim Knowles. But what did he learn from that? What is he taking personally into year 2? And when he looks at this personnel that now he has a year with most of them, That's very different than a year ago where you're coming in blind and he didn't even want to look at the film from 2021 and form new evaluations. How does what he's got in his brain about what is returning for Ohio State shape what the positions will look like and also how he calls plays in year 2 as a coordinator?
Yeah,
I bet
there's
he
a lot
watches
there
the
with Jim
tape.
Knowles. Yeah,
I bet he watches
will
last
watch
year's
the
tape.
Yeah, I think he will.
Wow. You guys were in stereo on that one.
Phil, you're up. Next one? Who do you got? What's on your mind?
If they played a game tomorrow, who would Justin Fry's 5 be? And I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't answer that. It's a hypothetical, obviously, but that's probably the best way to kind of get at what's going on with the offensive line. With only two starters returning, and I guess you kind of consider it 3 because we all assume that Josh Fryer will start somewhere, either of the tackle spots. Is Matthew Jones going to get any kind of look at center? Is Donovan Jackson going to get any kind of look at tackle? Like, where does Tegra Shabola fit in? I think Austin and I talked a couple days ago, maybe last week, that he's probably a guy we've not talked enough about when it comes to guys who could step up into starting roles on the offensive line. I don't know, like Jacob James, he's going to be out this spring. We know he had the shoulder surgery. Like, what does that mean for him as he tries to find more of a role on the offensive line? And frankly, do they have enough depth, even if they can find 5? Do they have 6 or 7 that they can reasonably feel good about come the end of spring ball? I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's kind of up in the air. And if you don't have 6 or 7, I think you're in kind of a bad spot. So I don't worry so much about finding the starting 5 because I think they have some fairly good options there, but the depth is still concerning. And I'm just sort of generally interested in guys like Zen Mohalski and how they're coming along.
Yeah, to me, the interesting thing is how the decisions that get made over these next 8 weeks essentially can mold the depth for the season. Because if you are, for example, putting Matthew Jones at center when you have Jacob James, who's obviously competing for the job but hurt, when you have Carson Hinsman, who is looking for an opportunity to go compete against Vic Cutler, for example, who's coming in and with the intention of playing in one of those middle 3 spots as well. What happens to Enoch Vamahi if you keep Matthew Jones at guard? There's a lot of these pieces that certainly Vamahi's been in the program for 4 years now. You think that he's in an opportunity. This will be his 5th year. Sorry, an opportunity to play. So if you bring in another guy to play and you keep Jones and Donovan Jackson at guard, what happens to Vamahi? Do you slide Matthew over and let Vamahi fight for the job with Cutler? Does Cutler play center? I mean, there's a lot of these things that are really tough to figure out. What about Ben Chrisman? We never talk about where's he at in his development. He's a guy that came in the 2021 class. You'd expect that Zen Mohalski shouldn't have jumped him the way that he has, but he seems to have done that. There are definitely questions, but the questions about the depth, I think, change almost entirely depend on what they do in the next few weeks as far as who you plug and play where throughout the spring.
Yeah, and I wonder about that specifically with the Enoch conversation. Like, there have been times where Ohio State has looked at him and thought maybe he could play tackle. I don't think that that's the ideal outcome, but if you're trying to piece this competition together the way that you're talking about in the spring, and you may still have it in the back pocket that by May you're going to look in the portal for a tackle, like, there's no harm in trying in March with any of these guys, because I think we know exactly how it will mostly look from left guard over to right tackle. Like, it's going to be experimentation at the left tackle spot, right? Like, it's
I think that, again, we're talking about just whose job is it to lose. I think at this point heading into the spring, it's absolutely Zen Mohalski's job to lose. And so the question is, what does he have to do to lose it? And what does Tegra Shabola or somebody else have to do to take it? Because there's certainly talent there. These guys are they're high level recruits that came to Ohio State, but you look at guys like Grant Toutant or Trey LaRue, who clearly have not been able to move themselves up the roster at all. And that's depth that, reasonably thinking, I would imagine that come end of spring, probably won't be there at tackle. So you're still going to need bodies.
I guess what I'm saying is, if I'm Enoch Vamahi and you've been close, you've been number 7 in the rotation, like roughly, or certainly last year, a guy that they trust to put in the game, I think that he's a guard. I think that that's certainly where Ohio State would prefer him to play. But wouldn't you just say, let me play anywhere in the spring? I don't think there's a clear path to him to start at guard, or certainly, I mean, we haven't seen him do anything at center. Like, why not? like just give it a go and find out if you can do it. Like,
Yeah,
because I don't see any other like obvious path forward for him.
on the flip side, Bill, don't you think that lends to maybe moving Donovan Jackson to left tackle and keeping Vamahi at guard where he's most comfortable because Jackson athletically has the makeup to be a tackle?
I think it could. Like I'm a psychopath, so I was watching the spring game yesterday, looking at Devin Brown, and was reminded that Donovan Jackson played quite a bit of left tackle in that game. So I think it's possible. The thing that's in my head about Enoch is they gave him the start against Michigan. I think he got maybe 2 or 3 drives. He got beat pretty badly by Mozzie Smith on a play that C.J. Stroud almost got sacked. And then he didn't play again after that. And Josh Fryer played the rest of the game. So I don't think that was like his one game audition and he doesn't have a shot to redeem himself. But I do wonder what that tape might do to the coaches in their minds when they're trying to think about who can start next year, because that was an opportunity for him and it didn't seem to go all that well for him.
Yeah. I guess it's my turn, huh? So Keenan Bailey is the new tight ends coach. We've obviously talked about that a bit. Kevin Wilson's the tight end coach in the last few years, and he's a guy who was an offensive line coach before that. So I do wonder what Keenan or how Keenan is being used in that role, because offensive linemen at Ohio State and tight ends are very similar at times. Are the tight ends going to work more with Justin Fry, or is there going to be other stuff because Keenan is more of the pass catching, route running mold? How does that mesh together now with a really unproven group of tight ends outside of Stover? And does Keenan Bailey's ascension to that role change the needs for those guys to get coached by other guys? Does that make sense?
He's gonna punch you in the arm if he listens to this before tomorrow.
I know he knows the coaching points. I understand that, but it is different as opposed to a guy like Kevin Wilson, who'd been a coach for 40 years and coached the offensive line and seen all this other stuff.
Yeah.
It's different.
That's also why I think Ryan Day made a concerted effort to put Keenan Bailey down there with Justin Fry and Mike Salini at times last year to learn how to coach offensive line. Keenan joked about it in our interview down there at the Peach Bowl about how he considered himself to be the real offensive line coach. That was definitely a joke, but he spent enough time doing that over the last couple of years. I think they wanted to broaden his ability to coach multiple positions. I think they could reasonably assume that was going to be tight end for him at Ohio State, and that he was prepared to do some of that blocking stuff. Again, the breadth of knowledge and on-field experience for him is not going to be the same as what Kevin Wilson had, but I don't think he's going to lack in that department to be able to teach those tight ends what they're capable of doing. And I think I mentioned this in the build-up to the Peach Bowl, there's a lot to be excited about with Cade Stover returning and a healthy Joe Royer the way that he was coming on at the end of the year. I think that group could be in line to do some Luke Farrell, Jeremy Ruckert type stuff and expand the playbook even further. There's reason to be excited about the tight ends as always. I mean, we spend every offseason trying to hype up that group, and this isn't about the number of catches they have. I do think that they're going to be good. They're positioned for a lot of success in my mind.
I'm buying a lot of Joe Royer stock, I think. I think I'm going to do that this offseason.
Yeah. Stock report going up. That's normally what we do on Wednesday, but instead we're pushing it back with some of our questions for press conferences Bill and I normally do during the season on Tuesdays before we go in to hear from Ryan Day. But we wanted Berm to be involved, and we wanted to do it on a day that we're actually going back into the Woody for the first time in a while. We're all excited to do so. We'll have some Snappy Jays later on. We'll have a stream of Ryan Day's press conference set up for you on the podcast YouTube channel. And then
I have to say, isn't this weird though? Like Wednesday is signing day, right? Like, and
not anymore.
To be clear, there is no expectation Ohio State will sign any 2023 players on signing day. No new names that will be added. You'll see some walk-ons around the state probably put their pen to paper and make themselves available to Ohio State in that way, but not scholarship players tomorrow. So it is weird, but this is the new normal, and I kind of love it. It's pretty great.
You didn't seem to love it all that much in December.
Well, no, I don't like the early signing period in December. I really do believe that the NCAA needs to make August 1st and February 1st the signing periods and go from there. But that's totally irrelevant. My opinion doesn't matter to anybody.
It matters to me, Berm.
Yeah, I like it.
I mean,
agree.
it's the only thing that makes sense. You let people sign the early enrollees sign on August 1st, get them done. If a head coach gets fired or leaves, then you allow the kid to move on and sign in February. And you push back enrollment 3 weeks, because guess what? School doesn't matter anymore. Like these guidelines are all based around, oh, well, you need to be able to enroll in school. No one cares. Just show up whenever you want.
Ohio State just added a transfer on January 31st.
Right. No one cares. Just show up whenever. I just think it makes perfect sense. August 1, February 1. Leave December for, bowl prep and graduation.
The good news is that the NCAA always makes the decision that makes the most sense. That's what they're known for, is great common sense judgment and application of rules. So I'm sure they'll be doing that any day now, and we can all be very excited about the future of college football under their leadership. Hail whoever this new guy is who's
I like to just
I don't even know his name, but I know he's going to suck at it.
Yeah, it can be bad. I've always said that the NCAA stands for not consistent at all. But now nobody cares about anything. That's the new NCAA. That's what the NCAA means now. Nobody cares about anything. So just, who cares, man? Just sign whenever, show up whenever. You want to transfer? Cool. Here's $1 million to do it. I mean, this is great. We've really, really nailed it, college football.
Again, Snappy Jays are coming later. I'm sure that Berm will have something else to get worked up about, and we'll talk about that with a Woody Wednesday. This, however, has been the Podcast Daily to get you set for everything that's about to follow afterwards later on today. We'll have full coverage there on ohiostate.rivals.com. That's Bill and Berm. I'm Austin. We will talk to you later.